Yeah, I noticed something that I thought maybe it's time now I start making individualized videos to help students. So with your lesson plan, I noticed that you didn't write your objectives properly. I indicated to you that words like reason, abstractly and quantitatively, are difficult to measure. How would you measure? How would you know that students are able to reason abstractly and quantitatively? So this is not how we write the objectives. So when we write objectives, we should use words that will be able to um, help people or teachers to see if students have met the objective. For example, I have been talking about using Bloom's taxonomy. If you go back to our discussion of writing effective lesson plans, we had a sample of Bloom's taxonomy words. For example, we have the knowledge domain, the comprehension domain, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Under each domain, they explain to you what each domain is all about. So when you are looking for knowledge from students, you are looking for them to remember previously learned information. So words like name, identify, arrange, it's all about looking for students' knowledge. So when you are writing now your objectives, for example, you say I'll ask students to name. So I thought maybe you want students to be able to name something at the end of the lesson. So your objective will be students will be able to name angles such as, then you give us the names of the angles that you want them to name. So if they are able to name them, then we know that they've made the objective. So things like use appropriate tools, we don't know exactly what you mean by use. So your words that you are supposed to use, they should be measurable. That's why we are encouraged to use language from the Bloom's taxonomy verb. If you want them to be able to draw, I noticed that in one of your assessments you were saying that they will draw. So when you are asking them to draw, you are asking them to construct something maybe. So maybe it will be under synthesis, and it should also show in your objectives. So one thing that I have noticed that is that your objectives and your assessments and procedures are not really aligned very well. What do you mean by aligning of objectives and procedures and assessments? For example, you are asking students to be able to name angles such as. Then when I look at your assessments, I have to see that word name or that idea of being able to name something. So your assessment should be able to also show that you are asking students to name. Then use the appropriate tools. In your assessment, I don't know how do you assess the ability to use appropriate tools. So it wasn't measurable, so I didn't see anything here that tells me that they'll be able to use tools appropriately. So here, like I said, you were writing things like, then each student will practice using a protractor to draw angles. This is a problem because when you say we'll practice, you are now telling me about the procedure and all the stuff which I'm not supposed to be knowing at this point, because I'll see them in the procedure section. So under post-assessment or interim assessment, just be straight and very simple. Indicate what type of an assessment that you are going to use. If you are going to say they are going to have a writing assessment in which they will draw something, that will be part of your assessment. So what I decided to do is, for example, here where you are saying as a class we will watch the simulation on angles. This is part of the procedure where you are watching something. Just let me know what assessment are you going to use to check for understanding. Remember, interim assessment means you the teacher, checking for understanding when the lesson is in progress. Post-assessment is how are you going to assess if the objectives have been met. What assessment are you going to use at the end of this lesson that will give you feedback on whether your lesson was a success or not. So, for example, in your interim assessment, you are using as a class, we will watch a video. We will discuss how to use a protractor. So, my assumption is that you will be asking them how to use a protractor as part of your assessment. So, here is an attachment that I am going to send to you. It is about 7 pages of different types of techniques and assessments that you can use. For example, you could have said, I'm going to use oral questioning. So in that oral questioning, you list some of the questions that you are going to use as part of your interim assessment. I'm going to use oral questioning in which I'll ask students such kind of questions. That way you are able to show me what exactly the assessment is and what type of questions that you are going to use to check for understanding in your interim assessment. I'm not saying you should use oral questioning. I'm saying this is how I expect to see a specific type of an assessment that you're going to use as part of your checking for understanding. So review the whole document in terms of the type of techniques and assessment that you can use, and then choose one. I also noticed that you write a lot of stuff that are not part of assessment, like procedures. So I would say don't do that. Just be simple and straightforward to what exactly you're going to use. You see, I've written this side, students will be able to draw, because in your assessment I could pick that you want them to draw something, but the way that you have written your explanation here, I could not really tell what your assessment is gonna be. But I just picked this word and I thought maybe you should have it here because it's not showing. So why do I have to have the objective that is asking students to be able to draw? Is because our objectives, assessment and procedures should be aligned. So what is the meaning of the word alignment? So what it means basically is, for example, if you have an objective which is saying students should be able to name angles, then your assessment, you have something like students should be able to draw something. Drawing and naming are not aligned. So what you are asking students to do in your objective should also be represented in your assessment. Again, in your procedures, you should be able to have activities that allow students to name something, activities that allow students to draw something. I can see here you have got activity, I'll draw, yes, that's fine. But I want you to go back and actually clean up your document because you have potential, and then write your objectives very well and align them to assessments. Then also coming down here, I asked you a question about at what point would you be able to explain the objectives of the lesson to the students. The problem that we have is that we're just jumping into the lesson. Students are not knowing what exactly they're supposed to do in that lesson. So you need to explain that. And then I think we did a discussion on Ghanaia's 9 events of instruction. So this website has got some examples of Ghanaia's 9 events of instruction. Just don't pick everything, pick what applies to your lesson. And I also want you to look at a simple lesson plan in this website, which will show you how you write learning objectives or learning target outcomes. So if you are going to add another objective, which we say is that students will be able to draw, make sure that you go back again to the Bloom's taxonomy chart and look for the word draw somewhere, or else think about where would it fit, then you pick the domain. I hope I'm making sense here. If you have any questions, please let me know.